Hello, this is Patrick W. Crawford, and this is the whirlwind behind the scenes for These Eyes, from Mr. Herobrine's Singalong Tragedy. So, a whirlwind behind the scenes video is where I talk about as much as possible in the time span of the original video. In the top left hand corner, you're going to have a hand-drawn animatic. In the middle, you're going to have a midway previs render. At the bottom, you're going to find the final result that you'll find online. Enjoy!
So this shows one feature I added to the MC Prepped add-on I developed, where it actually adds some variance into the location and heights of things like grass, like in Minecraft itself. This is an example of how I used booleans in order to do extra effects. I had a boolean modifier which would intersect, the cube would intersect with the waterfall so that it would look like it was moving downwards. To emulate Notch interacting with the Minecraft world, I actually used this screen recording where I made a couple Python scripts. One was a copy of the original MC Prep to just look like there's lots of data and whatnot. And the one that actually is running on the console, putting on the stuff, is just printing random numbers with this short script here. Nothing fancy, but it makes it look like it's actually running something. For scenes with heavy amounts of mouth animation, I would just do the mouth animation first so I could focus on the details and then animate the rest of the character. This is an example of how I turned the Minecraft fire texture into an actual video file I could use. So on render, I'd only do this little amount of compositing. It would first run the vector blur before the defocus blur, and that's what actually give a slightly more fluid animation, and it has to be in that order, otherwise there's errors. When I'm doing my animations, I'd often do previs renders, and these are the settings I would change in order to make renders go really fast. This is also how I would make the emit pass. I would then basically only pass through the emitted values in the scene and use that as a extra compositing feature we can see here. So you see this is again how I add on the glowing eyes or other things in the scene by adding this emit pass. So this is speed up me how I work with physics simulations. I first do the simulation, then I add as a group, then I append it into the scene with my actual animation, and then I work with the rest of my animation to make sure it fits. It's much more convenient to work with. So throughout this production, I did lots of Steadicam versus handheld cam effects, and you show how I set that up here. I first do a lot of work with the curves in the curve editor to make the motion really smooth, just adjusting the curves just right. And then I add noise modifiers to the rotational channels, the X and Y rotational channels, and this makes it a very nice, fluid, and realistic handheld motion. Here I demonstrate how in my 3D animation scene I can get really low playback, but in the sequence editor, if I enable caching, I can play through once and it's slow, and then the next time it's perfectly real time. So this shows how I actually did the string animation or simulation. I used a lattice which had a cloth simulation of which the string would be applied to. For reference, the original source files are about 20 gigabytes, the original render files are about 30 gigabytes, and the shared project folders, my directors, were about 3 gigabytes. This shows how I actually originally intended to do one of the later scenes. I didn't have time to animate the Herobrine character, so it was just Notch. And this shows how I made the sort of atmosphere or cinematic feel of one of the later scenes. I heavily used throughout the project the use of the atmosphere setting in a sky. So you see this is what it looks like once you turn that off from a sun lamp. And this is once you turn off the sky modifier for the actual world setting.
So that was the whirlwind behind the scenes for These Eyes. If you are interested in seeing more whirlwind behind the scenes for the other acts, you can check those out left here. If you want to see more in-depth videos, a little bit slower and more explanation, then you can watch out for other videos in this playlist over here. And as always, thank you for watching.
Moo-Ack.